What's up, everybody? Metal Dave Glessner here, along with my co-host Jason McMaster. Thank you for joining another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Our guest today is our old friend Frank Meyer. He's joining us for the third time on our show. Frank, you know from the Streetwalkin Cheetahs, punk rock band out of LA. He's also an accomplished author and filmmaker. Here today to talk primarily about his latest film. It's called Freestyle 101, The History of Hip Hop. And I watched it last night. I believe it was on Amazon Prime. You can Google it and find out where to watch it. It explores the beginnings and the culture of rap music and hip hop, and especially the art of freestyling. And he managed to get some really great cameos on this film. Chuck D narrates it. Ice-T makes an appearance. Guys from the Wu-Tang Clan, Be Real from Cypress Hill. Fat Joe is in there. And there's a lot of up and coming rappers that I'm not familiar with, but so, you know, we're obviously not a rap hip hop podcast, but we have respect for the genre.
To be clear, Frank is not a hip hop artist, right? But he is a writer and a filmmaker and a journalist, as well as a songwriter, blah, 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 blah. He's a Renaissance man he wears many, many hats. And, I mean, anyone who watches, for art's sake, watches the film, you don't have to be a hip hop fan or a rap fan to understand where this is all coming from. And there's a lot of, for lack of a better terminology, headbangers, you know, that like Ice-T, that like, you know, a lot of that like NWA, a lot of crossover. I remember, I know a lot of punk rock dudes and headbangers that love hardcore gangster rap, that love hip hop, because it's almost like punk rock, or it's out of control and over the top and somewhat extreme in some lights. And that's why it can cross over a little bit. So they're going to already know a lot of the artists that Frank was lucky enough to have in his film, talking about something that they feel is important and who are at the top of their game, and they're the experts. And we talked to Frank today all about that, as well as many other things. It was really great. It just it reminds me how much I love Frank and just his energy on just art.
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it right there. It's like he approached us about being on the show to talk about a hip hop movie, and you know, we were immediately like, yes. And the reason for that is because
it's Frank.
It's Frank. We know he is so passionate about what he does. He's a great talker, great storyteller, and he handles everything he does with such care that you know it's going to be quality. So I was like, I don't care if he's talking about ukulele music. Let's have him on the show. I know he can make it interesting verbally on a show like this, and in the finished product like he did with his movie Freestyle 101.
Well, there's a lot about freestyle that, you know, the movie, I personally I've watched the trailer. I've not seen the film, but what I know, and that's not very much, it's like an inkling about the whole genre, the idea. I even mentioned 8 Mile, and if you've seen 8 Mile, then you know you might ought to watch the movie because it's relative. But the point that I'm making is, as a singer, and Frank's a singer too. We get into it a little bit, and it's important to me to know. Okay, well, they're freestyling. Okay, they're making this up as they go along. Does it make does what they're spitting out, the rhymes that they're vomiting, does it make sense, or is it poetic and it's like the most beautiful thing? If you typed it out and you read it, is it the most beautiful poetry you've ever experienced as a fan of such literature? You see the point. This is sort of an underground thing that has created something, because before there was a style of pop music called hip hop. There is freestyling, and it comes from the street, just like blues, just like country, just like everything else, just like rock music comes from all of those things. It's very organic, so organic in the way there's no written part. No one comes in with, they're not, you know, looking in their pocket on the, you know, looking at the back of their, pulling up their sleeve, looking at notes they took before they walk up to the mic.
Right. It's all, as they say in the movie, off the dome.
It's real. It is off the dome. Yeah.
Off the dome,
top of your head.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. So it's that's incredible. Not anyone and everyone could do that. So that's why I am quickly fascinated with the idea of, I mean, okay, what if there's a band on stage, a rock band? You know, I'm a rock singer. I can go up and make some words up to a song that I've never heard before. That's what it is. I'd be freestyling lyrics that they're not written down to a song that I've never heard before. Yeah. That would be the same thing. Who can do that?
Yeah. That's the premise of the movie. It's on the spot, off the dome. And I think he also makes the distinction between East Coast versus West Coast. Not that it's a battle necessarily, but there are two different styles. And he explores that in the film. It's really well done. I mean, Frank does quality work. This is his second film around the hip hop rap genre. He's a big fan of that type of music. So we talk a great deal about that today. It's already getting rave reviews. It's been out for a few days now. By the time you hear this episode, it'll be out for about a month, but you can still find it. And not to make it all about hip hop, we also talk about Frank's latest band, Trading Aces, as he calls it, sleaze metal rock and roll band. And I that's what I would call it. So great new album there. He's also got a new release by his old high school band that reunited called Highway 61. The album's called Driving South. They're a little more roots rock oriented, but all things Frank Meyer today, his new film, his latest music, and always a great conversation.
You're goddamn right. I'm on time, Dave. I'm not one of these fly by night, artistes. I'm out there on the streets, baby, representing, keeping my my schedule.
You're a professional on the streets.
I'm a professional on the streets, sort of like a young Stephen Piercy. Really, that's how I see myself. That's really how I model my whole career, like Stephen Piercy in 1982.
We all dream of a house in Vegas, so there you go.
You're goddamn right.
Yeah. What's up, brother?
Man, I'm good. How you boys doing?
Excellent shirt.
Thank you. Yeah, hold on. Let me give you a little action on that.
That's the second album, isn't it?
Well, no, I mean, there's really only one official album.
Yeah, there is.
Though there is technically a second sort of bootleggy album, but that's really the first and only album.
The Silent Majority is the title track, maybe, or is that?
It's the name of the album, and I think it is a song on there. But the whole album is just incredibly. It's a lot.
Yeah, for people who are listening and not watching, we're talking about Frank's Life, Sex, and Death shirt.
Right.
It's pretty rad.
Not my life, sex, and death, but the shirt is what you're referring to.
Life, sex, and death. Right.
Right. Thank God. By the way,
that's
LA,
a whole nother episode.
I like that you're wearing the LA Guns hat. Steve Riley, rest in peace.
Yes.
Yeah, it's sad news today, man.
Go ahead, because then I want to tell you a fun Steve Riley music thing that you got.
I was going to ask both of you, because I know Jason toured with LA Guns back in the day. I was going to ask if either of you have a great Steve Riley story. So Jason, why don't you go first, and then we'll let Frank jump in.
He was always cordial. He was on time. Him and his drum tech were usually the first ones up there working hard to get the sound check done so the rest of us clowns could get up there and do our thing. Very cordial.
Yeah.
Had a good time watching him work.
Yeah, I only met him one time, but he was nice enough to have us back in his dressing room, and we hung out for a little bit, and he signed a couple things, but the whole thing lasted 15 minutes maybe, but he impressed me as a really genuine, sweet guy. I know he and the band had some contentious moments, especially in later years, and I was sad to see that. But as a fan, as a spectator, as someone that doesn't have to do business with either camp, I get to admire them sort of at a safe distance. And for me, I'll always appreciate all the great albums that he played on with LA Guns and Wasp.
Yeah, legend.
Yeah. Frank, what's your story on Steve Riley?
Well, I don't even really have a story so much as I'll take you that before LA Guns and before Wasp, he played in this great band called The Buzz, and it was spelled B-ZZ. And they had a song called Get Up, Get Angry that kind of sounds sort of like if you took Stars with a Z and melded with like the Angels, Angel City, like that vibe, like really killer, straight ahead hard rock, great singer, great band. And, you know, and I heard this song through when I met you, Dave, and I was at KNAC, KNAC.com, Long Paul, he played this song on the radio one day, and I was like, damn, what is that? This song is incredible. He goes, man, that's The Buzz, Steve Riley's band, before anyone ever heard of him. I was like, what? Wow. And I picked up that record, and that record is smoking. It is just a top to bottom killer hard rock record with great songs, great performances, great production before anyone ever heard of Steve Riley. So I would just say my great story is check that record out. I believe you can get it on, you know, Spotify and, you know, normal sort of outlets, but it's and then B-ZZ, and the song is called Get Up, Get Angry, but there's a whole record and it's killer.
Wow.
That's great.
Cool. I didn't know that. You know, something else I think I knew this at one time, but forgot about it. But he was also in a version of Steppenwolf at some point.
He was. He's one of these guys. I mean, same with like Frankie Banali and some of the, you know, or Rudy Sarzo, Jeff Pilson. I mean, there's just guys who are like, they're just OGs, they're vets. They were doing it before you heard of them, after you heard of them, on shit you never heard of at the time. Like, these guys are just playing and playing and playing and playing. You know what I'm saying?
Rudy alluded to that. Excuse me, hold on.
Yeah,
when we had him on the show, right? Dave can take over. He alluded to him and Frankie doing a bunch of work.
A lot of those guys were just doing a lot of studio work. I mean, if you know, there's an original version of Dawkins that features, who's the guy on guitar? Greg Leon on guitar. Before George Lynch was in Dawkins, Greg Leon was the guitar player on some of that Indy 7. Juan Crocier from Rat was in it before Jeff Pilson. And I'm just saying that, like, all those guys were, like, circling around and playing in each other's bands. And, like, you know what I mean? It was the LA metal scene between, like, 1978 and 1982. And I just feel like, I mean, look, Jason, you were there, but you weren't based in LA, but you were in there at the same era. But I just feel like there was a lot of like incestual, like, oh, I played on this guy, like what's his name? Jamie St. James from Black and Blue. He's the drummer on the first Wild Dogs album.
Whoa, wait a minute. I thought Dean Castronova was.
I go look it up right now. Am I mixing up? Is it Wild Dogs or is it Exciter? Which one of those is the Portland band?
Well, Exciter, it's Black and Blue is a Portland band. Wild Dogs is a Portland band.
Okay, then I believe the original drummer, and you could look this up on Google right now.
The original drummer.
The original drummer of Wild Dogs, who played on like maybe the first indie stuff, was Jamie St. James around the time he was doing Black and Blue.
Wow,
and again, I just go meaning like all these guys. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you were playing metal in like 1982, like you were working with all the guys playing metal in 1982 at some point. You know?
Yeah. You mentioned Frankie Banali. One thing I learned much later about him was he played in a version of Billy Thorpe's band, who's famous for Children of the Sun.
I didn't know that.
Children of the Sun. Yeah, Billy Thorpe. Billy Thorpe. Frankie Banali played on a later record. I think there was only probably 2, maybe 3 records out at the most, and he played on a later version that didn't have the hit song. But yeah, to your point, those guys were sort of circulating in the scene, and became famous for something else. But they have a track record of having been elsewhere before you ever heard of them.
Well, and it's like Jakey Lee was in Rat while he was doing, before he was in Ozzy. And, there's just a lot of like guys bopping around, finding their way until they made it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until they try out for Dio.
Right. That's exactly right.
Well, rest in peace, Steve Riley. Thank you for all the great music. You will be missed. Frank, we're here to talk to you today about your latest, man. Jason and I are having a hard time keeping up with all your projects. This latest is a film documentary, I guess, called Freestyle 101, History of Hip Hop. And I actually got to watch it last night. I have to confess, I had to hit pause at about the 3/4 mark. So I've seen most of it. And in typical Frank fashion, it's very well done. I see you posting some stuff on social media. The early reviews are already great. What impressed me right away, just off the bat, was some of the people you got involved in this. You've got Chuck D narrating the film. You've got cameos from Ice-T, Be Real, some guys from Wu-Tang Clan. I mean, the roster is pretty impressive. So, first of all, what were you aiming to do with this film? How long did it take you? And then how did you get these big names to lend their participation to your film?
Well, essentially, back in the early 2000s, as you guys know, because I've known you all for a while here, I've always doubled between being a musician and working kind of in the film and TV industry. And I was at NBC for a long time, and NBC had a TV network called the G4 TV network that was like kind of a smaller network within the larger NBC infrastructure, and they were focused on video games and tech and kind of pop culture stuff. And it was kind of the Wild West in a sense that like we had major funding, but like no one really policing whatever we were doing. So you had guys like me, and there's a filmmaker, a horror movie director named Joe Lynch, who's gone on to do a lot of stuff. And, guys like he and I who were just working there as like field producers and content producers, but basically, getting sent around the world to film content, and then occasionally being told, like I was, like, hey, we're doing this TV show called Attack of the Show, and we need web content that's sort of complementary to it. Like, what sort of, I don't know, pop culture ideas would you have? And I was a guy who, as you guys know, like most of my music career is rock and roll, but I was always a hip hop fan, and I was always sort of fascinated with rapping as like this technical thing, the way that like me as a guitar player, I could listen to Eddie Van Halen talk about guitar playing and get really detailed about it like all day long. And I was like, how is no one talking to rappers about this, like on that intricate sort of musical level? Because like,
especially freestyling.
Especially freestyling, because it's
the first
all
one in here to say that.
Yeah, because it's all improvisational. Exactly. So like, I just felt like at that time, there wasn't a conversation happening with people about that. And I knew that every rapper couldn't necessarily freestyle, but I also understood that every rapper sort of started the same way, which is just, making rhymes with your friends, like the way all guitar players start, bopping, playing some licks, trading licks, doing ciphers, doing battles, just, figuring out who you are as an artist, what you are as a voice, you know what I mean?
But when it's vocabulary.
Right. Well, that's what's so crazy about it, right? Because that's what's so crazy about it to me is I was always coming from this guitar player musical standpoint of like, yeah, if you put this piece of wood with these strings on it, like I sort of can like connect the dots and maybe even on my best day, like improvise and be interesting. But like, I can't do that in I mean, right. What you're hearing right now is me doing that in a conversation, but like to be able to like make wordplay and, like make these intricate rhymes, you guys know as songwriters, like that's a challenging thing. And then to do it off the top of your head is crazy. Yeah. So when I, as a fan of the genre, just casually started hearing these like expert freestylers rap, this is before I was making the show, I was just like, what the hell's happening here? And how is no one like talking about this sort of on a more like musical level? So when I'm working at this TV network and they're like, hey, if we give you a small budget, what would you want to do? I'm like, I want to talk to rappers about rapping. And I'm going to use freestyling as our conversation piece. And while I got them there talking about it, I might as well damn well have a microphone ready and get them in the booth and do it. So I would have like a whole bunch of beats ready for them to come in and just go, okay, nah, okay, I'll take that fifth beat, let's go. And then I would say, look, if you can freestyle freestyle because that's sort of the premise of the show. But like that conversation might lead to you saying, I'm not a freestyler, I'm a lyricist, and here's why. So then give me a lyrical thing, but I want it in one take. Like, I don't want you punching in. We're not making a music video here. Like, I want you on the microphone. Here we go. Record, done. Like, that's your performance. So every rapper had to do like a live in the studio performance. And after like the show started doing well and won some awards, I was getting like Ice-T and Cypress Hill and Wu-Tang Clan and like these huge, like it started off and I was getting much smaller rappers, and all of a sudden I was getting these giant rappers. And then I went to the network and I said, man, I've got 110 of the greatest rappers in the world talking about the same, essentially, subject matter, like where I came from when I first heard rap, when I first started improvising, and then where that led me as an artist, and then a musical performance demonstrating what they do as a craftsman on the microphone. And how is that not a documentary? So I got them to give me a small budget, and I started pursuing 2 younger rappers with the idea of like, okay, that's all interesting, but the movie can't just be like talking heads about the history of freestyle rap, though I had that. It's got to lead somewhere. And so I thought, well, what if you followed like the 2 divisions of where it's become now? Like on the East Coast, it's battle rapping and it's all like boxing. So, you know, it's this combination of improvisation and coming in with like premeditated lines and punchlines and homework. And so I got this rapper, Iron Solomon, who was like the leader of that school, that, you know, that school of thought, that scene. And then over on the West Coast, we had Open Mike Eagle, who was this more like improvisational, artsy backpack kind of rapper who came from the freestyle scene of it all being improvisational, and you can't come with any pre-writtens at all. And that was sort of informing him as a songwriter. And so I kind of follow these guys around, and essentially the premise of the movie is like, here's the history of freestyle rap, and now here's where it's landed now. And now you're these experts in this field, but like, okay, welcome to the music business. Like, what does that get you? Because as you guys well know, like, what does it mean to be the best guitar player in town? Like, maybe you can go in and just smoke that club on open mic night, but like, where does that get you in the music industry? Like, what does that mean to be like, you know, a perfect craftsman at this tiny little thing that maybe in the larger scheme of things is undervalued?
Wow. I have that makes me want to go a few different ways with it. Do you feel like, I mean, you're asking a great question. Did you ever find the answer to where does that get you? Is it a lot like the rock and roll or the pop music thing? Does it get you, if you're the badass freestyler? I mean, it's not a scene from 8 Mile. Your thing is not a scene from 8 Mile, right? It's real, and I'm wondering where, I mean, if that's Eminem's real story, look where it got him. That was freestyle. Well, was that you know, like, tell me in layman's terms, how does that correlate?
Eminem came from the golden era where you had to sort of really think on your feet and be a freestyler. And Eminem is known as being a freestyler. I mean, Eminem, like his music or not, but that guy is an absolute monster on the mic. And he was the Eddie Van Halen of his time and his era. Okay. And forget about white or black or anything. I'm just saying, when he came out, every single person kind of had to go like, whoa. Like, oh shit, like that's the new thing on the block right now. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't know if I was going to be embarrassed or not embarrassed by bringing up Eminem as
no. Eminem's incredible.
That scene from 8 Mile where it's a battle, right?
Well, it is kind of like that. Like I said, like freestyling became 2 things. Like on the East Coast, I mean, that movie is a movie, so it's a little bit sensationalized, but that kind of is what it's about. It's like 2 dudes for money, with sponsors, sometimes with a whole bunch. You know, you might have Busta Rhymes and Puff Daddy up in the balcony judging you, holding up cards and shit. Like, it's a real deal. It'd be like, I mean, Jason, you're a lead singer. Imagine going up and singing and then have like 10 famous singers holding up numbers saying like 2, 4, you know, like Steve Perry sits up and goes like 4, and you're like, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, you're just singing your heart out. And these guys are like, you suck. Pretty good. I loved him. 7. And
that's
then the next
voice.
Guy,
that's the voice, the rap.
Like, that's what I'm saying is like, that's what the battle rap scene is. It is sort of like the voice where it's like, that's some cutthroat shit. Now, but again, as we've seen from all of these competitive vocal TV shows, like none of that gets you a career if you don't have the ability to be an actual artist. And
That's right.
And that's not just hip hop, that's just music. Is like, if you can't back up that ability to hit those notes, or that ability to be a dazzling rapper or think on your feet or be a dazzling guitar player, but if you can't back that up with something that's got some substance, like, you're sort of, like, you might, hopefully you have a career, but like usually it won't last because you're not backing it up with like, and now I will apply that dazzling talent to this memorable thing.
I feel like I know the answer as a songwriter, not a freestyle artist, but I think I know the answer to where I'm going with this. But I feel like, I want to ask you, is it about the song that they don't know or definitely know how to create, to write, to have a hook to get them somewhere other than, yeah, I just won, $10,000 for being the most badass freestyler, but after I burn through this $10,000, what now?
I think it depends on your goals in life as an artist, and just as a, I guess as a person with a career or in a career arc. But meaning, like, if your goal is, I just want to keep making that money and be the greatest thing at this craft, like, and that's an honorable goal. There's nothing wrong with being like, hey man, I'm just going to be a boxer. I'm going to go out there and knock motherfuckers out and take that money. Like, that's an honorable goal. And that's a very straight ahead sort of way to make a living. And maybe there's something about that that's sort of even more honorable, because like, you don't have this dream that like, and then I'm gonna make the song that's gonna change a generation, and what I mean, like all this bullshit that like the rest of us get trapped up in, this idea that like, what I mean, like if you just know like I can just go out there and punch a motherfucker out and collect that money, then go get that fucking money. But what happens is that a lot of people that have that skill set dream bigger, and they go, whoa, man, I know I could put together rhymes and sentences, and I have this, and now I've got a name for myself, and now I'm making some money. And so like, why couldn't I have a hit? And that's where I go, those are different skill sets, because your ability to like think on your feet and be dazzling and theatrical is a different skill set than being able to put together a full artist package with songs and hooks and like boil that shit down to a 2.5 minute piece of art that like immediately grabs people. So like, you can, there's like KRS-One is the greatest, or Chuck D are the greatest rappers ever, but like most rappers that love those guys don't quite get to that level. Meanwhile, Ice Spice outsells everybody. And you know what I'm saying? And like, it doesn't mean that she's better. It's just that she's going for like, she's not trying to dazzle you with lyrical skills. She's just writing pop songs. And people call her a rapper because she's black or whatever. But like, reality is she's a pop star. She's right. And like, so it's just, what do you want to be with your career? Right. Like, do you want to be a pop star and do you want to be famous, or do you want to make some incredible music? Jason, you would be the perfect example of this conversation, because you, in my opinion, have had both sides of that career. And I don't mean just artistically, but with record sales behind it, in the sense that like, you were in Dangerous Toys, that at the time was a band of the era that sold a bunch of records, being part of like, hey, this is 80s hard rock. You know what I mean? Like, this is part of the scene. Like, and I'm not saying that's like any artistic judgment call. I'm saying like, you did that thing. You know what I'm saying? Meanwhile, you were in Watchtower, which is like, sold a lot less records, but is like among the most credible and sort of revered bands of a genre that's way more narrow and way more specific. And like, the prog metal, with the exception of a few people, has never been a giant seller the way that like hard rock is. So you're a guy who's probably sort of put your foot in the rock and roll thing of like, I've done some fucking super ass, weird, specific, artsy stuff that appeals to this tiny sliver, but they love it. And you've kind of made some pop songs. You know what I mean? Sure. And that's what we're talking about here. And what, like, and then what's the difference? I don't know. I mean, ideally, I guess, wouldn't you want to be like you and maybe do both? I mean, that way,
of course.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to be Chuck D or one of these guys successful, or I go, man, I've had a few hits and I've also done some just fucking rad art that, like, I don't care whether it's sold or not. Like, people think it's incredible and they love it,
Well, Ice-T has a metal band and he's a rapper.
Ice-T is a perfect example.
I see both of that. But before, I want Dave to take the mic. But here's one thing my mind keeps racing to, and it makes me think about a lot of people. Daryl Abbott, Dimebag Daryl, Pantera. So when he was a little kid, he would do these guitar battles all over. He'd fly to LA, he'd fly to Nashville, he'd do them in his backyard, whatever, record stores and music shops and guitar shops. And hands down, he would blow everyone away and win the grand prize. And the grand prize was free guitars and free amps and free studio time.
And I've seen some of those videos on YouTube, and like he's shredding, kid just shredding.
So this is like a rap battle, and he's winning all of them. He's taking home all the money. Yeah. Like your analogy about the boxer, he's knocking motherfuckers out, but he's not gone pro.
But he's also thinking about, like, I'm gonna,
he can write a song other than go. He can write a fucking song, and that's what we're talking about.
Well, and that's also, I mean, to me, the ultimate musician is Eddie Van Halen. Like, I think we can all agree Eddie is like Godhead, right? And to me, he's the other example where it's like Eddie was Beethoven. Eddie could outplay everyone and created new shit, but he also could write a 3-chord rock song. Yes. And Ain't Talking About Love is 3 chords.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's 2 chords. There's the riff, but you could boil the whole song down to 2 chords. What's more punk rock than that? The guy knew, Frank Zappa even knew the power of Louie Louie. Like, there's something brilliant about being simple, and there's something brilliant about being complicated. But the idea is that you're writing memorable material with hooks that people will always carry on, decades later.
Yeah.
One of the standout moments in the film for me, I think it was Be Real from Cypress Hill. And he made a point that kind of alludes to exactly what you two were just talking about. And that is a lot of in the film, you see a lot of this freestyling going on. And what it struck me as was there's a lot of guys out there and girls that when they're doing the freestyle thing, it's all about getting the rhyme to land on time and nothing more. So I don't care if it tells a story, if there's a lyrical theme to this, as long as I rhyme koala bear with I don't care on time, I'm winning, right?
By the way, can we props on that rap there? Can we just get koala bear and I don't care was actually a pretty complicated monosyllable. I mean, okay.
MC Metal Dave.
God damn, Metal Dave. Is
MC Metal Dave.
MCMD.
Yeah,
kicking it real. Damn, son.
But so there's that school of thought, which is the freestyling, and then Be Real. I think it was him who was making the point. And then there are the people that have that knack for incorporating the rhyme into something lyrically thematic that lyrically tells a story. It's not just a jumble of words where the rhyme lands on time, which I think I hope I'm not oversimplifying freestyling, because there is a skill to that. But if you take all the lyrics to a freestyle, if you captured them all on paper as they're being spit out, and then you looked at that paper, you'd go, what the hell is this? Right?
Well, I think, no, not necessarily. I think with some people, yes. Like, some people are just going for the sort of performance of it and the ability to just come up with the rhyme and keep it on time. And then, of course, you're watching them and they've got personality. It's like anyone else. It's like any other musician. It's like, if you can just sort of keep going and be dazzling, like, that counts, that puts you in the game. But the really good ones, and I say this because, like I said, I shot, 120, performers, some of whom are the greatest of all time. And what I can tell you is that, like, there's a performer in the movie, for instance, named Micah 9. Micah 9 comes from a group called Freestyle Fellowship. Freestyle Fellowship are a West Coast group, and they came from a school or a school of thought that came out of a club called The Good Life. And The Good Life was like the CBGBs of South Central, essentially, in like the early 90s. So it was a club where if you went in there, everything had to be improvisational. Everything had to be off the top. You couldn't come in with some writtens. You'd get booed off the stage, Apollo style. And like big, huge rappers would come in there and they'd be like, get the fuck out of here with your fucking pre-written rhymes. Like we got, Mike, we got Freestyle. So, and the group that came out of that were like 4 ridiculously great MCs: AC Alone, Self Jupiter, Micah Nine, and Peace. And these guys were the Eddie Van Halen, the Randy Rhoads, the George Lynch, the Warren DeMartini. Like these guys were the best, and they formed a group that were the best. And they were sort of along the lines of the Far Side. If you guys know the group, the Far Side, like Far Side were sort of the more commercial version of what this scene represented. Freestyle Fellowship was like the real true thing. Anyways,
I feel like I've seen a documentary about this club.
Yes, there is a documentary about the Good Life, and we explored
I've seen that.
And then that became a scene called Project Blowed, which is based out of Leimert Park. But so early on, when I was doing the podcast content, that became sort of the nexus of this show, I knew, just because I'm a hip hop fan and I'm from, Los Angeles, I knew like, okay, the Good Life, Project Blow, Leimert Park, like that's kind of like the scene, you know what I'm saying? Like that's where, if I'm going to go make a show about rapping and freestyling, like I should probably go down to Leimert Park and start talking to these people, right? And so I got in touch with Micah Nine fairly early on, and he ended up putting me in touch with Open Mike Eagle, who is the star of the film. But when he put me in touch with them, Open Mike Eagle was just this kid in this other group called Thirsty Fish. But like he was like, you want to see some young freestyling, like some monsters, go check these kids out. And I did. And I was like, holy mackerel. So I've got them in. And then this guy, Mike, and I really got along. And when the thing became a documentary, I brought him in. But here's where I'm going with this. In the movie, Micah Nine performs and he talks a bunch. He's the opening scene of the movie.
Yeah.
And then later you see him rap. And there's like a few times in my life, and we're all guys that, we play music, but we've been lucky enough to like be in the room when other musicians have just like been incredible. You know what I'm saying? Like those kind of moments where like, I don't care who we are, but like where you're a fan and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I can't believe what's happening right now, right? So I was in this room one time. It was the first time I met Micah Nine. I knew who he was. I knew he was one of the dopest freestylers. I'd seen Freestyle Fellowship live. I was a fan. But he came in, and the only thing I can explain, or the only way I can put it would be like in the Matrix when like everything stops and like, you know what I mean? Like the molecules all of a sudden are like splitting and like everything's in slow time, or it was like Houdini levitating. Like basically what he did, he was going completely off the top, totally musical. Going back to your thing, Dave, like if you printed out what he was saying, it was the most beautiful artistic poem you've ever thought of, read in your life. He's talking about butterflies, it being captive in a jar, but the light's hitting them and they come out of the holes, and just like some shit that would, a normal poet might take 6 months to come up with that shit. And he's just like, and I was just sitting there like with a camera on him going like, holy shit. Like what? Like it was like I could like see every atom in the room. I could see every molecule. Yeah. So like when you see shit like that, that's where I was kind of like, man, how is this not a story? How is this not a movement? How has no one told this side of this music? Because normally people talk to rappers and they just want to know, when did you sell crack and how many times did you get shot and who did you fuck?
Right.
And I'm like, that's to me is actually like the 3 least interesting things about every single rapper I like.
Yeah.
Like the ones I like, I'm like, how did you think of that?
Well, you're also an artist, so you kind of come at it from that perspective too, and maybe the casual spectator is just interested in the sensational headlines or whatever. But you sort of have some insight because you're a musician, so it kind of makes sense that you might look for something a little deeper on an artistic
but I think
level.
also I think most fans of the music, just like you guys, and we're all fans of metal and punk rock and classic rock and all the stuff that we love. Like, I think if you love the music, you just, if you really love the music, you're not a casual fan, like, it cuts through all that stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be white, black, nothing. Like, it just, like, music connects with you on a level that is unexplainable. You know what I mean?
I have a question that goes back to earlier in this conversation. And it ties in with also with Dave's koala bear rhyme.
By the way, thank you for bringing it back, because that's really been the most overlooked moment of this whole thing, was when Dave freestyled earlier.
Yeah.
And by the way, I need you to isolate that, make that a meme. But we're gonna bring Dave the rapper. We're gonna bring that guy out. I think that's a thing now.
Koala bear with I don't care. Koala bear with I don't care.
Yeah, Dave, he didn't go to college to get the knowledge to save the koala bear because he don't care.
Damn! Whoa! Shit! Holy macaroni!
So what I want to ask and talk about and bring up again is the aspect of freestyle, the idea that the person with the mic, the person at the mic, or on the street where there's no mic, right? Where it's really real, isn't it? When it's right there on the fucking street, and the boys are just hanging out, and then it's your turn, and you. Well,
I mean, the bottom line is, in a real rap battle, you might get punched in the face.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, meaning, because it's just a bunch of dudes saying shit. So, like, if you really cross the line, like, they'll let you know.
Well, whether it's a throwdown, like an actual where the guys are just cutting each other down, like I'm gonna go, and then it's all cut downs, and then the other guy comes back and it's all cut downs, and that's what a lot of people feel like freestyling is just a bunch of people cutting each other down the whole time, and there's probably a name for that.
Well, I mean, that's basically the battle side of it. Meaning, what freestyling kind of became was, like, in New York, it's battle rapping, and that's exactly what it is what you just said is, not only is it cut downs, though, it's okay in that scenario to come in with a written, meaning, like, it's actually encouraged, much like boxing, where, like, if I know, for instance, that your persona, as you say, you're this hard gangster, but, like, really you went to Catholic school, to, like, the private school, and I figured that shit out, I'm gonna have a whole rhyme ready to, like, publicly humiliate you. But also, if some kid in a red, Scully t-shirt suddenly jumped in the mix and said some crazy shit, like, I also got to be ready to, like, put that into the mix, or people are going to be like, oh, it's all lines. He's not like working with the moment. But in LA, like, if you came in with all that pre-written shit, like, oh, I did homework on you, they just be like, get the fuck out of here with all that.
Well, my question was going more to, and I'm excited to ask this question because I'm hoping that you just vomit on me with all kinds of cool shit, is they have to be smart. They have to have this vocabulary. They have to have this vernacular. They have to have this, they have to know words, especially, and this goes back to what Dave was saying, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook if it's just, they're worried about the rhymes. Because the most baddest motherfuckers that I have not seen, I'm not going to claim to have, I've never been to a rap concert. I've never, I have rap albums. I have hip hop albums, but I'm not a connoisseur. So the idea of freestyling, just, you have to know words. You also are allowed to make words that do not rhyme.
Sure.
That goes with the knowledge, that goes with being able and knowing how to make two words that are so far apart in meaning, or that do not go together at all, fire and gas, and you make them rhyme. That is a talent within the talent. And then once again, back to Dave's thing, making it all make sense, like having it be this beautiful, poetic, socially aware, real current events and everything come to fruition by the end of it all. That's art. And that artist, in my book, could probably figure out how to write a hook and have a song that could be played in clubs and on the radio and not just be knocking motherfuckers out because they can rhyme.
Right.
How do they get, are they scholars? Are they college graduates? Do they have degrees? Are they doctors and lawyers that are these bad fucking badass rappers that are able to do all of the things that I just put in the bucket? How are they getting the knowledge? Are they readers? Do they live in the library? Like I said, where do they come from? The ones that are true and able to do that, because I can't do that. I stew over finding a cool line that lines up in my lyric to just sound cool. I'll make it make sense later. That's how shitty, that's some imposter syndrome, I guess, but it's real, because when you're trying to write a kick-ass rock and roll song, you're not really caring about what it ends up being about, right? Right.
And a lot of times with rock songs, you're going more for a vibe and an emotion, and you might go, this sort of doesn't make sense, but it 100%. Sounds cool. You know what I mean? It kind of works, and it sounds cool if I yell it really loud and, blah, blah, blah. And there's certainly some theatrics involved in writing. I think, to answer your question, that most of the guys who are writing the kind of more intricate lyrics or informed lyrics or lyrics with like a point of view.
Not writing. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Freestyling.
Well, freestyling, but either way, meaning the people who are coming up with this material.
Okay.
Yes, they're for sure. They're readers, and a lot of these folks I've talked to have done. They read the dictionary. They read the thesaurus.
Wow.
Meaning like they look at the idea, and this might be a concept that is starting to become a bit antiquated in hip hop, because like right now in hip hop, I don't know that like your average trap MC is like reading a thesaurus, because if you look at the lyrics that most younger rappers are saying now, they're not particularly, lyrically interesting.
Okay.
So I'm wild guessing that some of the more modern rappers are not bothering to do this level of homework. But you could make that analogy like in any genre of music, meaning like how many rockers do we know, young rock bands like really do their homework and know who like the Stooges and the MC5 are, as opposed to just going like, hey man, I like Guns N' Roses. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like you make that argument just like in terms of a generational thing.
To be clear, I honestly don't really care if it's the like totally incredible freestyle that made sense, that was the Bob Dylan of freestyle, or the person that's freestyling and none of it's making any fucking sense at all. But the rhymes are good. I like both.
Yeah, for sure. But I think a lot of it really comes down to like all of these things, whether you're an improvisational artist or you're a songwriter, they're all informed by who you are as a person and who you are as an artist and how informed your brain is. So like, if you just don't know a lot of shit, you're probably not going to say a lot of shit. You know what I'm saying? If you've like done a lot of research and have a point of view about things in life because you've like actually lived a life and seen some shit, or are well-informed, or done your homework, or done some reading in life, then you're going to have something to say that has more substance, because you're not just a kid going like, well, fuck, this is just what I think. You know what I mean? Like, what I think, that doesn't actually mean shit to anybody. Like, no one cares what you think. Tell me what you know. That's interesting. You tell me that you were on the block and you saw some shit and that's why you think this other thing. That's interesting. You just telling me you think it means nothing to me. Everyone can think something. I want people who've lived a life and have like informed. And if you can give me some information and be poetic and, put all that, even better. But I'm saying like, I don't care what just the dude on the block thinks.
That's what I was gonna offer as a answer to Jason's question. Where does the inspiration come from? Is it bookish? Is it studying or whatever?
Well, it's being like an artist, meaning like if your thing is rapping, how are you gonna not know how are you going to not know wordplay? And
right.
how are you going to not study the language?
My point is, you might not be quote unquote formally educated, but you're so immersed in that scene, you're a fan of it. Like we've talked about Eddie Van Halen a bunch of times today.
And also, but what does formally educated meaning? Like look, dude, I've made my whole since 14. I play guitar. I don't read or write music.
Right.
Like, I'm not formally educated, but I make a living off being a musician. So define formally educated. How is a rapper and my version of it being educated? Like, how's it different? Meaning, I'm just a guy who I picked up my instrument and I figured it out.
Right. That's exactly my point. My point was you end up, you're a fan of something. So you absorb it that way. It comes to you through
become
immersion.
An expert.
You drown yourself in it, and then
experience. You just do it and do it and do it,
and
do
then
it,
you
do
become
it,
an expert at it. Like I was saying, we talk about Eddie Van Halen. You can go to MIT and become a great guitar player, or you can be a kid in a garage that just studies records inside out and plays guitar like you, Frank. And then you become obsessed with collecting records. You become obsessed with different guitar players. You start merging styles. You never had a lesson in your life. All of a sudden. And it doesn't happen to everybody, but that's how it can happen.
Same with writing a song. It's like, you're drawing from so many different things, but it's not the kid on the block saying what he thinks. It's not you in the bedroom telling people what
like
you
think.
Have
some informed, like you're like, hey man, I've been listening. I want this to be like AC/DC meets Cheap Trick meets this. It's gonna
you're a sponge.
You're a sponge, and you start coming up with ideas that are, I'm not saying that, of course, every songwriter is coming from their own point of view. But what I'm just saying, when it comes to like lyrics and stuff, it's like, or just listening, like, dude, when you're at the bar and you're just listening to some dude talk and some dude's just like, blah, 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 blah. You're like, what the fuck, dude? I don't, but if someone goes, look, man, I was a plumber for 14 years and I was just on a plumbing job. And I'll tell you this, all of a sudden you're like, okay, now you got my attention.
Yeah.
What you're telling me is, you got some experience in this trade, and now I might be informed. But when you're just like, man, people suck, blah blah, I'm like, man, you just sound like a fucking people.
Yeah, that's a different personality. I
have a quick question, because you just brought this up, and I thought about it, and I don't know the answer to this, because we were talking about like reading and writing music, and whether and I'm not saying that if you don't know how to read and write music, you're not an expert, because I consider myself an expert in my field, but I just figured out a way around reading. I don't know about Jason. I don't know if you read and write music.
I don't.
My question is, did Eddie Van Halen read and write? Like, could he write out, or
notation?
Or was he just, like the rest of us, like figuring it out and maybe some tabs?
I don't know, but I will tell you this. Jimi Hendrix and Michael Schenker, two of the greatest songwriters and guitar players in the world, and kind of get an amen.
Yeah, for him.
Yeah. Did not read and write music.
Michael Schenker didn't, even with all, I would see a guy like Schenker, I would think was like Randy Rhoads.
I would drop my mic, but it's on a stand.
But Randy Rhoads, like, he wrote though, right? Like, I feel like Randy, because he's a guitar teacher, he had to be writing all that shit.
He was a student. But I think, to answer your question about Eddie, he might have been able to do that later on in life, but
I'm not saying he did. I just wonder, could he?
I don't know, but I've always been under the impression that a lot of it was just a natural gift and a natural ear, and he translated it to this guitar, and he didn't like the way the guitar sounded, so he built his own.
Yeah, that's how I did it. I don't sound like Eddie, but I mean, meaning I just, was always going by my ear, which is again why I just say, like, as we talk about like what makes a musician and like rap versus hip hop and stuff, not that there's a versus at this point, because I feel like now hip hop's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, you can't argue at this point that like it's a musical force.
Right.
But I always just thought that, and I still do, that people maybe undervalue sort of the musical artistry behind rapping, and to me the most fascinating example of that was freestyling, because it was so improvisational, and I just sort of felt like, boy, you don't see that very often, like in even music anymore, outside of like jazz, you know what I mean? And being like totally improvisational.
I like the way the film drew a lot of analogies to jazz, as being very improvisational. I wanted to clear up a technicality on the film. When we started this conversation, I was asking you about how this came together, and you sort of told me about in some previous time you had a small budget and you were capturing bits and pieces. How much of this current film, Freestyle 101, is a start to finish film, and how much of it is possibly a compilation of some clips that you've had from previous projects and you've merged them all together?
No, what it was is I started off making a podcast, and after I shot about 110 episodes of that podcast, I then got a budget to turn that content into a documentary film. And at that point, I started following around Open Mike Eagle, Iron Solomon. I did a whole bunch more interviews, all the stuff in Leimert Park, all the stuff in New York. Basically, what I had up until that point was just interviews of rappers in a recording studio talking about freestyling and rapping. And I knew, like, well, hell, that's a lot of the content of a movie, but that's not a movie because you need some sort of narrative structure, and there has to be like a 1, 2, 3 act sort of storyline, and just people talking about the history of something without there being like any emotional connection to characters. I didn't know if that was sustainable as a feature. That felt like a half an hour documentary to me. Right. And I wanted to do a feature. And so I thought, well, let me pick some guys that sort of represent what all this means in the modern music industry. And this was around 2015. And let me follow them around, and let me now do some follow-up interviews now that I kind of have this premise in my mind of not just tell me about freestyling, but like, what does this mean for you as an artist in the modern music industry to be like this craftsman at this specific thing? So I did a bunch more interviews. So, I mean, honestly, here's the exact way you can tell. Everything in SD, everything that's not widescreen, that's all when I was doing the podcast. Anything that's in widescreen is after I got the budget and I got better cameras and a real crew, and we like went out and like started making like a movie. And then what happened is that NBC pulled the plug on the entire G4 network, and they owned the footage. And so I lost the rights to the footage, and then they became the Esquire network. And I was one of the few people, me and my boss, Rob Juster, who's now was my boss, but at the time was my boss at the time, but is now the producer on this and my last film. We wanted to continue this project, so we went to our new bosses at the Esquire network and said, guys, you're not going to believe it. You have already paid for a documentary about the history of freestyle rap. And I got Chuck D and Ice-T and all these incredible people, and you're not going to believe it. And we showed it to them, and they're like, no. We're not interested in this. You know, Esquire, I think, was a lot, you know, they're like, there was a lot of black people with fronts talking about, you know, freestyle, bebopping, hip hop. And it was just like, this is not what we're about, Men's Lifestyle Network, you know. And so they rejected it, and we lost all the rights to the footage.
Terrible.
Now, what also was happening then is that one of the rappers that I'd interviewed during the podcast and I had a previous relationship with was this guy named Hellraiser. He was a Wu-Tang Clan affiliate. He was in this group, Sons of Man. I had worked with him in 1997. I was his publicist, him and Killa Priest in their group, Sons of Man. I've known this guy forever. He and I stay in touch. I'm doing this podcast on hip hop. He comes on the podcast. I'm doing this documentary now. I'm like, you should be on it. I film him. And then he has a brain aneurysm, and he loses the whole left side to his body, including the ability to walk and talk and rap. And I go out to film him. Or I go out to talk, not even to film him. I was going out for like an awards thing, and I was just like, let me come visit you. And I went and saw him, and I was like, oh, shit, like he's way worse off than he's saying. And so kind of all around the same time, like this guy, Hellraiser, who was supposed to be in the movie, suddenly has a brain aneurysm. And I lose all the rights to my freestyle movie. And I went, well, fuck this TV network. I can tell Hellraiser's story without them. Like, yeah, okay, maybe I lose like a few interviews, but like I've known this guy forever. I even had old footage of him back in the day. I'd shot on like a camcorder and stuff. I'm like, I can go tell his story without them. So I went and made my first movie, Risen, the story of Sharon Hellraiser Smith, which is me for 5 years following him around during his recovery and stuff. During that 5 years, Rob and I negotiated the footage back from NBC of all the freestyle stuff. So not only was I able to include some of that in the Hellraiser movie, but I got all this stuff back. And like I said, that stuff was not only the podcast material, but all the stuff I shot to be this film. Yeah. So essentially, when the pandemic hit, Risen had just come out. I'm suddenly grounded from my job because of the pandemic. I've regained the rights to all this footage. I've got a rough version of the movie I was intending on making sitting on a hard drive. And in my head, I was like, oh, I'll just hire some editor to do that. But now all of a sudden I was like, well, shit, I literally have nothing else to do for the next year while the society repairs itself. So I just dove into the movie and started sort of rebuilding, you know, the movie I was originally intending on making. But, you know, I also now as a better editor, you know, I was a few more years into doing all these things. So I kind of like, I had all the original files and I had a cut of where the movie had left off, but I came in and tried to give it some spit and polish. And, you know, dude, if I'd known that this thing was going to become a movie, I mean, we weren't even shooting in 1080. Like when we shot this thing, we just thought it was going on the internet. So like the first, I'm not joking, like the first 70 episodes, we didn't even flip the switch to like the best quality recording on the cameras. We're like, shit, it's just the internet, 720p, bro, whatever. And then like later I'm going like, why did we not just go to 1080? Like it just went click, like one more thing. But we were just like, save space, like it's cheap, like, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know, like I was a kid, like, so really this movie is kind of like this giant body of work I did between 2008 and 2015 in the world of hip hop, specifically going down this path and this narrative and this thesis of like freestyle rap and what does it mean as an artist, you know, in modern music.
Who were some of the people that you reached out to participate in this documentary and you couldn't get them for some reason?
The only person I specifically remember reaching out to that I couldn't get was KRS-One. You know, KRS-One is a great freestyler, a great rapper, and also just someone that like almost every single person in the entire movie cites as like their influence. And I reached out to him multiple times, and he lived in LA. So I was convinced I could get him, and I just couldn't. And there's no like story around it. It's not like he told me no. I somehow could just, you know, I could get Chuck D, I could get Ice-T, I could get MOP, Mobb Deep, Fat Joe, Dell, I could get everyone. Master P came in at one point, but I just could not get KRS-One. I wanted him so bad because you know, it's just like if you're gonna tell the story of heavy metal, you know what I mean, you better goddamn well have a member of Black Sabbath in that story,
right? Oh, yeah.
Right. You know, there's just some people in my head. I'm like, if I'm telling the freestyle story and I don't have KRS-One, you know what I mean? Like, and I didn't get him, so it still bums me out. But what are you gonna do? Like,
but you got an impressive roster of cameos. It's pretty impressive. And so, I was going to ask. So how do you secure those folks? How much of this? Are any of these handshake deals? Are you cutting big checks? How do you get Chuck D to narrate this thing? How do you get Ice-T to show up? How do you get B-Real to show up?
Dave's always asking our guest how much money they had to spend on their project.
Because our listeners would be interested. I know if I was watching Frank's movie and I was thinking, how did this guy, I want to know how he was able to get Ice-T in this film. I mean, Jason, if Rob Halford guested on the next Broken Teeth record, people are going to want to know how you were able to secure Rob Halford on the next Broken Teeth record.
Right. But it's different though, when you hire someone for a session versus doing a documentary. When you're doing a documentary or documentary style content, you're kind of going under the impression that the artist themselves is invested in being part of this story. And it's also sort of understood for the most part that documentaries and documentary style content doesn't really make anyone any money. So it's more like, hey, we're going to have this conversation and I have this platform of getting it out as a movie or NBC or whatever, do you want to be in the story of the history of freestyle rap, or do you not want to be in the story? Like, you don't have to be, but you can be if you just sit over here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
so as opposed to come in and sing and give me 3 tracks and let me have a, take time out of your schedule and a producer yelling at you and blah, blah, blah. And you know what I mean? Like, so it's different. And so to answer your question, every single person in the entire movie came in and essentially did it for free. And the only person I paid was Chuck D. And the reason is because I needed Chuck D to come in and read a script and take direction, which was from me, which was insane because I was tripping out. But but meaning I needed Chuck D to do a job and to hit his marks and to show up somewhere. That's a different story. Whereas everyone else, I was essentially, and I was giving them, they knew what they were getting into, was telling them, like, come do an interview about what you do. It's going to air on either NBC's, G4TV.com website, or it's going to air on Attack of the Show on NBC. And you're going to get something out of this as the artist, because you're going to be profiled as a musician and a rapper in this context, which everyone seemed to be very into that idea. But also, it's going to end up either on G4TV/NBC's website, which is a nice platform for you to be on, or best case scenario is our TV show, Attack of the Show, would take some, Cool Keith and Cypress Hill and some of the bigger ones and put them on TV. So like you could come on my webcast for like a half an hour of your time and talk about rapping and rap like 16 bars, and it could end up on NBC.
Yeah.
And at that time, no one was offering any real rapper the opportunity to talk to a major commercial platform as an artist and a musician, being asked serious questions about you as an expert and craftsman in your field, and then getting to do what you do, well shot, beautifully done with respect and no exploitation. At that time, I was probably the only person offering a rapper in America a platform to fucking be treated with respect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
it would have been the same.
Guess what? They all wanted to be on it.
That's why I asked the question. That was very insightful. That was very insightful, because I think people would be interested in knowing, it's in some of their best interest just to show up and sit down.
Well, and they would sign a release like they were on a TV show or any, meaning, same thing. Like, look, if I went to Comic-Con for NBC and stood in line, as people as the celebrities walk down the line, I shoot their little interview and get them to sign a release, meaning like you're just doing an appearance essentially. It's just I'm giving you an appearance where you get to, the context is, here's an expert.
Right.
Instead of just like, hey man, here's a black guy, or here's a guy who got shot, or here's a fucking gangster. You know what I mean? All these, like, there's no sensationalism. It's like, nope, here's a musician talking about being fucking an expert.
Right.
What I found is that a lot of rappers were like, yeah, I want to be in that conversation. I enjoy that. I enjoy this premise.
Well, it would have been the same. I mean? Would have been the same if your content would have been about hardcore.
Fuck yeah. If it was about blast beats and drumming, every blast beats and drummer would be like, we're doing a show about this. I need to be part of this.
Because it's something that a lot of people, in layman's terms, can't, won't, will not take serious ever. We're talking about an extreme style of music. And
it's like inside baseball conversation about these like very specific, genre within a genre within a genre. Like, don't just talk to me about rap. Talk to me about this thing you do.
Yes. Black metal, hardcore.
Yeah.
It's extreme. Yeah. Your content is just as extreme as those styles of music are. I have a question I want to throw at you before I forget it, because I do that sometimes. I'm so glad that Chuck D is narrating your film, reading your words, describing the world that is important to him and to you and to everyone in the film, because Chuck D could be arguable, have the best, here's the word, tone in the genre. Tone.
For sure.
The heaviest voice in the genre, probably. Dark and huge. He can still hit the high. He can still roll. He can still roll up there in the top head and come back down. And, you know, I'm talking about hip hop. I'm talking about rap. I'm talking about, he can slide around and move it. His voice is still heavy. It still has tone all the time. He never loses it. Kind of like a Dio, kind of like a Halford, like a rock singer. Okay.
Presence.
Here's my question. Right. Here's my question. Do you feel like, I'll just say, I'll pretend I don't know that it's kind of the same thing, but freestyle, is tone important to freestyle? Do you ever, in the making of your film, did you have somebody come up and freestyle and do a session, or, you know, just throw some rhymes out and their tone was unattractive to what it is you're trying to do, to the genre, to rap, to freestyle? Was the tone like, hey, and I'm Mike, and I'm going to think, you know, was it obnoxiously terrible, or was it actually kind of cool that they sounded so weird?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the tone is the issue. I would say that, like, overall presence and performance. I mean, look, freestyling, like anything else, I mean, there's anything about getting on stage that has an element of theatrics. So, you know, no matter how technical you are, if you can't kind of broadcast your personality and connect with the crowd on some level, whatever the crowd is, but like that is always a part of it. So even in something specific, like, you know, freestyling, like you're still basically, you're in a room, small or big, with a bunch of people that you're selling on your persona. And especially if you're battling, you know, you're selling your persona as harder than this guy, smarter than this guy, more, you know, done more research, whatever your point of view is in that thing. So that all plays a part.
But tone, how does the tone?
So what I was going to say is, yes, I think that like having that great tone, like a Chuck D, helps. But no, I don't think, if you had great rhyme styles and you were truly a great rapper who could handle yourself in that moment, or just really put together some really interesting or intricate rhymes, or whatever the definition of being a great rapper was in that context, I don't think tone would be your problem. Because there's been, you know, the Beastie Boys, all, not, I mean, but certainly like, you know, Ad Rock and stuff, there's a nasally tone there that, like,
and I actually like that.
No, I do too.
I think that
in the context of what they do, it's perfect. But you could say, in out of context, like, well, I don't know, that's what kind of voice. It's not a classic rock voice, you know. I'm just saying, like, tone has a lot to do with it, and we can't underestimate the killer tone of a Ronnie James Dio or a Chuck D. But the bottom line is substance and artistry. You know, that's always the most important thing.
To throw another example on it, it's like, some people you meet don't like the band Rush.
Right. There you go.
And I say, you don't like the singer, do you? And they go, wow, yeah, that's exactly what it meant. Musician, man, the music rocks. Those guys are killing it. As soon as that singer starts singing, man, all nasally and he's funny looking. And I'm like, okay, let's play a game. Let's put your favorite singer in Rush.
See if it works.
Not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. You're going to put, you know, Sammy Hagar in Rush. You know, it's not gonna work. So
can you imagine David Roth?
You froze again. But did you say? Can you imagine David Lee Roth singing for Rush? Yeah. Yeah,
I was saying, like, as great as Rush is, can you imagine like David Lee Roth or Steven Tyler singing for Rush?
No.
Or he'd go to throw it back. Can you imagine Chuck D re-recording Ad Rock's parts?
No,
not going to work.
Right. So I had this conversation the other day with my friend Johnny Martin, who plays in LA Guns, and we were talking about we were having this very same conversation. It was about technically great singers versus, as he put it, singers who have personality in their voice. And I've always said one of my favorite singers is Tammy Down from Faster Pussycat. Now, from a technical standpoint, he's not that great a singer, but those songs wouldn't have near the personality if you had, you know, somebody with a trained voice singing them, and it's the character. So, you know, you go back to Chuck D versus Ad Rock or whoever the nasally guy is in Beastie Boys. There's room for all of it. There's a lot of people that can't stand Lemmy, and there's people that can't stand Bob Dylan, and there's people, you know, that can't stand Tame Me Down or whatever. And you know, all of those singers, but they do have personality in their voice. So you either have to decide if you like the personality or not, and it's not a matter of technical ability. Go ahead, Frank. You're back.
Agreed. I was going to say Lemmy is the perfect example because we all love Motorhead, but like he's not a classically great singer. And Bob Dylan's the same way. A lot of people hate Bob Dylan because of the tone of his voice, but like that's kind of why I love Bob Dylan.
Tom Petty made a fortune.
They're not listening. They're not listening with the right ear.
Well,
they're listening to the wrong thing, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people listen to Tom Petty and they think he's great. But if they would have seen Tom Petty in a club in 1975, they would have said, "This guy's never going to make it. What the hell are we listening to?"
Well, and then, not to interrupt, I think he's got a great singing voice. Tom Petty sings
does, but
great.
It doesn't fit the classical definition of, you know, obviously a lot of people.
I think Tom Petty one of my favorites, right?
Yeah, but he kind of forced people to gravitate toward him. It wasn't like he showed up and everyone went, "Oh my God, this guy's the best singer I've ever heard." It's like he grew on people and he brought people together and they eventually learned to accept it. And that's kind of where I'm going. And this goes back to the Ad Rock. I don't know if is he the nasal guy in Beastie Boys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
well,
right.
there's the other side. Tom Petty and Elvis Costello sort of almost had like this weird thing, the way they held their jaw when they sang. You know, so did Ronnie James Dio. So did anyone with great tone has a different shape and a different way that they attack words and syllables to give it flair. Johnny Rotten, you know, same kind of thing. So tone.
Hey Jason, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? Connection's okay. My whole life as a singer, when I'm on stage, I've always, you know, turned and drank water, drank a beer or whatever. But then the last couple times I've done like long tours, I got into this habit, and I read this interview with Josh Todd that kind of made me go like, "Oh shit!" Where he was like, "I don't drink any water on stage anymore.
I don't either."
Bad. Yeah, he was like, "I think it's bad for you." Yeah, and like I was like, I don't either anymore. I mean, maybe right before I go on, but once I start, I don't drink any more liquids on stage. And it wasn't until I read this interview with Josh Todd where I was like, "Oh shit, that's a thing." Like, and you're the same way. You don't drink. Yeah. No. And I used to just between every song I'd be like, boom, boom, boom. And now I'm like, no, I don't want it.
So what does that do for you? What's the advantage?
I feel like once you get warmed up, you know, you sing a few songs, you've kind of locked into your tone and your breathing and everything, and putting something on top of it. You know, like a boxer spits it out. They're not drinking water. A runner it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It gets on your stomach and
I also think it becomes mentally distracting when you're thinking about this idea that there's this sort of payoff or this thing in between that's going to replenish you, as opposed to just putting that out of your head and being like, "No, I don't need it. Like, let's just keep it moving." Now I find that as a performer, this has nothing to do with the movie. This is just me and Jason talking about being a lead singer, but it connects with being a rapper and just being a performer and a vocalist.
Yeah.
But now I find that once I go, I just want this like purity from my throat, and I don't want water, and I don't want anything. And I also don't even want to stop anymore. Like if we're doing a 90-minute set, 45-minute set, I want it to be like, and then good night, everybody, take it easy. You know what I mean? Like, because I find all that like time in between is sort of distracting for me, maybe as a performer and even as a vocalist. I feel like I just want to keep going. Are you that way too, or am I?
Well,
I feel like
I feel like part of it is like, but But you know, I announce a song all the time and wonder why the drummer's not starting it off. You know why?
Me too.
Glug glug glug. The drummer's back there drinking. I'm going, the fuck is going on up here?
What the fuck is happening up here?
Yeah, the bass
Get it
player,
together, baby.
the guitar player, glug glug glug. I'm like, what the fuck are y'all doing?
You're like, I'm the only one singing.
Yeah, you're not even singing, and you're worried about some shit. I call it a nervous slug.
Well, that's what because psychologically, that's what I'm saying. It becomes a psychological thing where you're just like, okay, I got to get to the end of the song, have my water, have my beer, have my shot, whatever your thing is. And I'm like, you don't need any of that, man. Yeah. It actually is better to just pop 4 or 5 songs off in a row and then take your breather.
So I was
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I wanted to talk real quick before we close. I wanted to talk about 2 other things that aren't connected to the movie. And I do want to come back to the movie when we wrap up, but I wanted to give Frank a moment to talk about Trading Aces. This is a new band of yours. Tell us about this band. Just give us the whole context around this.
Yeah, I mean, the quick story is just during the pandemic, when things grinded to a halt, I was reaching out to other musicians. I got in touch with Corey Clark from Warrior Soul. I worked on one of their records and met the guys who are sort of part of his European team. Like the way he does his career now is he lives in Greece and he's got like a band based in Europe. And so he just sort of bops around and assembles those guys. And I became pals with all those guys. And some of them were playing in a UK band called the City Kids. They were all in Warrior Soul. Some of them were playing this German band called Shameless. And just, they were like me, like all just hardworking musicians with home studios, banging out songs and records left and right. And you know, the world was over at the moment. You know, the pandemic was in full thrust, and we were all just like, fuck, man, let's just keep making music. And I just kept making music with these guys in different scenarios. And eventually, me and Dennis Post from Warrior Soul and Yvonne Tombach, the drummer, and this bass player, Bjorn Olsen, got together. And we were already working in these different projects. We were doing some Thor stuff, some Warrior Soul stuff, some other stuff. And we started writing these like really sleazy kind of LA Guns, you know, Guns N' Roses, Zodiac, Mind Warp, like sleaze metal songs. Yeah. And at the time I was kind of hoping like, you know, if the world gets back into normal, you know, life again, I would really like to go over to Europe more often. I used to go over to Europe with the Cheetahs, the Streetwalkin Cheetahs. I play in this punk band, the Streetwalkin Cheetahs. We used to go over there quite a bit, but just, you know, the way life had been, I hadn't done it in like a decade. And it's also tougher to get like 5 Americans over to Europe than it is like 1 American. And so I thought, boy, if I put together a band where everyone was based in Europe and they all were kind of established, then maybe I just can fly over there and it might be easier to like go tour Europe essentially. So we made the record. I went to Copenhagen. We shot some videos, put together some photos, did all the things that like a band would need to shop itself around. And then I came back and got us a deal with Ripple Music, which is like this sort of stoner doom metal record, but they love the idea of having this like sleaze metal super group. So we put the record out, and then I went to Europe and we toured a bunch and we made a bunch of music videos. And now we're working on the second record, and we're going to go back to Spain in January, and then the UK in March. And then I'm going back to Spain with the Cheetahs in March, and then back to Europe with Trading Aces. So at this point, I've got my American band, you know, Streetwalkin Cheetahs, and then my European band, Trading Aces. And the Cheetahs are a little bit more punk rock, and Trading Aces are a little bit more like sleaze metal.
Yeah, and the album's called Rock and Roll Homicide.
Yeah, motherfuckers get killed left and right. This it's like a gangster rap record set to like sleaze metal. Like it's just like shooting cops and fucking burning down buildings and just like mayhem and dynamite and axes and
I love the cover art too.
Yeah, I wanted it to feel very comic booky. So and that's kind of like I want every record as we go forward to be like a comic book and maybe like a different version. And one of these days I want to like pair up with a comic book company and make like a comic book based on it. But the idea is just that this, you know, it's like 4 rock and roll outlaws and we're just fucking like robbing banks and just, you know, just causing mayhem.
I noticed Tracy Guns is listed in the thanks on this. Is that right?
Yeah, because Tracy is good friends with Dennis Post from our band, and he played on the City Kids record. And when I first met Dennis, I knew Tracy, and he was kind of like the middle guy, you know. And he was like, "Oh, you know Tracy? I know Tracy. Fuck, if you're friends with Tracy, you know anyone that's friends with Tracy, that guy's cool. You know what I'm saying? You guys all know Tracy. He's cool, right? You're friends with Tracy. It means you're probably fucking all right."
Right, right. And the other thing I wanted to bring up and give you a chance to talk about, you were kind enough to send me and Jason these CDs, one of which was Trading Aces. The other one I was not expecting. You just kind of threw it in, but I love it. It's Highway 61. Man, I'll be honest, I probably have given this more spins than the Trading Aces so far. I don't know what it is. It's just that great blend of music that's like this really classic sounding rock that, you don't have to be in a particular mood for it. Like Trading Aces, you got to be ready to fight and rock and party, and it's Saturday night. And this is just like this sounds good all the time. I hear the Stones, I hear Van Morrison, I hear some Stevie Ray Vaughan, I hear Mother Love Bone on.
You're right on all of that, and basically that band is. So that's my high school band. I mean, when I was in high school, my very first band I ever started was my junior high school band called Broken Toys with a Z at the end because it was the 80s. And then that, we back in LA we had the Recycler magazine or Music Connection, and that's how you would find other musicians. And then I hooked up with some guys, and that band became 502, and then 502 became Highway 61. And Highway 61 was the band that I cut my teeth in. We played biker festivals and college shows and parties and clubs and FM station and all the hair metal clubs and stuff. And we never got signed. We never got a big break. But the band was great, and that's where I cut my teeth. All these years later, the guitar player in Highway 61 got cancer. And he wasn't doing so well. And we thought, just to kind of cheer him up, like, hey, man, let's get the guys together again, maybe make some recordings. And that idea became us making a record, and him during that process getting cured from the cancer and getting really re-inspired and just kind of finding maybe a little bit of purpose or something that he didn't have for a little while. And it certainly helped his overall, headspace to where he was in when he was recovering. So by the time the record came out, we basically had taken the best of our old material, a couple new songs that he and I wrote when he was, recovering from the cancer. And we made our debut record like 33 years after we were a band. And what was crazy is, I don't know if you guys remember B.B. Chung King. And he was also named Alan Mirikitani. He was a great blues rock player, and he's an LA guy from that early 90s. And BB, we had the same manager in him, and he was sort of like our mentor. Like, he was older than us and much better than us, and basically doing what we were doing, but 10 times better. And he would give us advice, and he worked at an amp shop, and he fixed my amps and would help me with stuff. And he just was kind of like an older guy telling us young idiots how to do it better and how to do it right. And he played on a bunch of our demos. And right around the time when Andy and I, he was getting over the cancer, and we were kind of starting to write some songs and going, oh, maybe this would be fun. Call the boys up, do something. I took those tapes and I got them all baked, and then I got them digitally transferred, and I was able to pull all of BB's solos on 2 songs off of the tapes. And so when we made the album, those 2 songs we recorded at the same BPM and then at the same tempo, and I flew in as solos. So on 2 songs on the record, we have unreleased 1991 BB Chung King, Alan Mirikitani is his real name, solos from our unreleased demos. So the whole record was like this kind of fun nostalgic trip where it was like my high school band, after all these years, got together, made the best of our material, brought back from the dead our hero, and finally made a record. And since then, we've been doing some more stuff. We did some gigs, some recordings, some music videos. And it's just been this sort of fun little side path. I always loved that blues rock sound. And so it's not really what I normally do, but it's always in my back pocket.
I love it.
Stevie Ray, man. I saw Stevie Ray and Jeff Beck on their tour together. That style is always in me. It's just that it's not really what I got known for. I got known for like punk and metal.
Yeah.
But I can do that blues rock stuff in a heartbeat. You know?
And I hear another artist I hear in this album is Santana.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. So it's called, the band is called Highway 61. The album is called Driving South.
Yes, sir.
And a couple of Frank's latest projects, Trading Aces and Highway 61, both worth checking out.
That's really cool it's basically your high school band.
Yeah.
It's something really
same
special.
4 dudes. Yeah, really.
Amazing.
And what was funny is all those guys I sort of stayed in touch with, but the bass player I had not talked to since 1993. And then all of a sudden, like very quickly, we were in the studio making a record together, and it was like not a minute passed by. Like it was really cool, actually.
Love it.
Let's bring it full circle and kind of tie in the film one more time. This is Freestyle 101, History of Hip Hop, is now your second film with rap and hip hop sort of the focus. And we know you as a punk rocker. We know you as kind of a metal guy. The obvious question is, when do we get a documentary or a film from you that focuses on those genres?
On what do you mean? On which genres? On like
either or, punk, metal, hard rock, something that we know you for.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because you're obviously credible and you have the connections.
The first film that I produced was I Am Thor, which is about the heavy metal artist Thor. I didn't direct it, but I produced it and I worked on it for several years. So technically, I have made a heavy metal film and 2 rap films. I haven't made a punk movie yet. I don't know. It's not really, to me, it's not about the genre. It's just about the story. It's just about getting inspired, either whether it's the story of I definitely seem to love underdogs. So there's always something about sort of the underdog cult hero story that appeals to me. But I also really like going in deep on these sort of genres within genres. But I don't know. Every time I've written 8 books and done 3 documentaries, and every single time I do one of these nonfiction works, I walk away from it and I go, never again. Like, it is so much work. Like Dave, you're a writer. Like to write a 10,000 word article is a thing. To write a 2-hour movie is a fucking project. To write a book is years. It takes a long to write a documentary movie and to follow through and get all the interviews you need and then all the backup. It's a lot of work. And every time I finish these things, I go, oh my God, that was incredible. And I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out. I've done it. My credibility is fine. How many films and books do I have to write for you to take me seriously, Hollywood, as a fucking storyteller? Like, I'm out. But then, like, something comes to me and they go, well, what do you think about this thing? And I go, oh, that is really interesting. Dude, so I'm going to leave with this because in like 2 minutes I have to jump on another interview. Yep. I'll tell you this, is that there's a rapper that is in both of my movies, a guy named Razkaz. And he's, to me, one of the greatest West Coast lyrical MCs of all times, produced by Dr. Dre at different times. Look him up, R-A-S, next word, K-A-S-S. He's an absolute top of his game MC who I've been a fan of since the second he came out on the scene. And he's in my film Risen because he was good friends with Hellraiser. And he's in Freestyle 101 because he's one of the greatest lyricists in the West Coast of all time. And he and I have been doing some interviews, promoting the movie because he's also a cool guy, much like yourselves. He's just like, he's a musician, he's a fan. He's like, yeah, man, let me help you tell the story. He's a great guy. And I keep telling you, like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm having lunch with him on Sunday because he and I came up with the idea yesterday, got on the phone together, came up with the idea for another documentary. And he's like, oh, you want to try? And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. What about this? And he goes, yeah, let's do it. So now I keep trying to get out and they keep pulling me back in, baby.
So then we will be expecting a punk rock documentary from you at somewhere.
No, I don't know, man. I at this point, I don't know what I'm going to do. What I want is one of these days, people keep saying, when are you going to write your book, Frank? When are you going to? No, what I want is someone who's as interested in what I'm interested in, but I want them to be interested in what I'm doing and that they can tell my story. I'm not telling my story. Yeah. The one person I don't want to talk to anymore is me. I'm done. I'll talk to you guys about me, but I'm sick of myself.
I feel you.
You know how it is, Jason. People ask me all these questions. I want to promote the product, but like, man, I'm sick of talking to myself. You guys are far more interesting. I could ask honestly, and we got to run. I could spend 2 hours talking to Jason because his career is far more interesting than mine. So, like,
I don't know about that. Thank you. I don't know, man.
And Dave, you're no stranger yourself. This kid here, he's trouble.
Yeah. Well, what would you and I do without Dave? See?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing. Somebody. I am telling your story in some small way, both of you. And
you actually, as you know, you've been a tremendous help telling a lot of great artists their story. So.
That's right. Frank, thank you very much for being here with us today. We appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. On behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave. Thanking you for watching another episode of our podcast, Talk Louder, with our special guest today, Frank Meyer.
Yeah.
Freestyle 101. Go check it out.